Hello there, industry explorers. My name is Siobhan Colleen. I'm your host, and today we are all about the construction industry. We're here to talk about how to become a superintendent. And here I've got Kathryn, who is a podcast host for her show Space to Build. And congratulations on your recent promotion, by the way, and your new journey as an entrepreneur. Tell us a little bit about yourselves. Yourselves. Oh my God.
Guess I now have split personalities or something.
It's doing Invisalign. Tell us about yourself.
So, I've recently quit my job. I was in operations and now I decided I wanted to be my own boss. So I'm trying to still figure out what that title looks like. So I'm playing around with the idea of construction entrepreneur. So I've got it branched under Space to Build, which started as a podcast and a community for women in construction. And now what I'm doing is offering workforce development and business development consulting services to the local subcontractors and general contractors in the DC, Maryland, and Virginia area.
Oh, I love that. You and I've got that in common. We're all about training the workforce. I love that. So let's just dive right into it. Let's talk about the construction industry. What are the responsibilities of a superintendent?
So there's a lot. As a superintendent, you will find that you are scheduling out the duration of the job, coordinating the day-to-day, and staying proactive about potential problems that could come up during the job. It's your job to look out for the safety of your crew members and fill in any necessary gaps. But that'll also vary from job to job and from company to company. But what I'm going to be explaining here today is from the perspective and experiences that I had becoming a superintendent.
All right. How does it fit into the big picture of the construction industry?
So as a superintendent, you're the one managing the actual job site and the day-to-day construction. So you're out in the field, boots on the ground, and you coordinate this work with the subcontractors, the laborers, the crews, on a daily basis. And then what you typically have is on a weekly basis, you're communicating with the clients that the project's going to ultimately go to. But also on a regular basis, you're talking to your project manager or your office team and coordinating with them the production that you're supposed to provide on a job site.
As a superintendent, are you supposed to be more of a general kind of person with like general skills, or are you supposed to be specialized?
So the superintendent is more that general overview of the job. So we're more like the jack of all trades. We know a little bit about everything, but we lean on our subcontractors to really be the experts in, say, the plumbing, electrical, mechanical, or even elevator work.
Gotcha. If you guys enjoy this live stream, head on over to patreon.com/industry explorers and become one of my patrons. Become one of my patron members. I don't like the word patron because to me it sounds like patronizing. I don't like that. I like to have fun. You're my patron. So come join me on Patreon. All right, let's talk about the lifestyle. Can you describe an example of a work project of a superintendent?
So what I spent a lot of time doing were interior fit out jobs, which is the office build outs. So with that, your hours are a little funky. They could start as early as 4 o'clock, 5 o'clock, 6 o'clock in the morning, or you could end up taking a night shift. And the idea is that you want to keep as much productivity around you as possible for the companies that you're going in and you're doing the renovations for, or for the neighboring businesses. So when I did office build outs, my typical hours were from 5 to 1. And when I start off on my day, it's checking in with the crews, making sure the people that are supposed to be here are here, going through any safety conversations that we need to have, and just making sure everybody is fit and ready to work. And so then we'll talk about what we're expecting for that day, any problems that they foresee, and then you let them just have at it and get started with their day. And throughout the day, I just check up on them, make some phone calls, schedule other contractors to come in and attend meetings. And then usually by 9 o'clock, we have lunch. More of that same process continues after lunch. And then I would usually head home between 1 and 2 p.m.
Fantastic. A comment just came in. Jeffrey McCoy says, very proud of you, Kathryn. I taught you well. Who is that?
He's one of my mentors. He actually pulled
Oh,
me out of the office because he realized how much I wanted to be in the field and gave me so much opportunity to grow from.
so that's a really key component of being a superintendent is you're doing a lot of field work. You're not necessarily an office worker. If you want to be a project manager, that might be the route you want to go. But if you want to be in the field, you should be a superintendent.
Correct. Yes.
What are some of the challenges that you have to deal with as a superintendent? Like, let's say something goes wrong. What's something that often goes wrong?
Oh, goodness. What doesn't go wrong? Actually, now that, Jeff is here, it's making me think about the project I worked with him on. This was before I became a superintendent. I was still what you consider a project engineer, but this is where I really got a taste for what it's like being on site. So we were working on a hotel in DC, and we were pouring slabs, so pouring the concrete for each of the floors. But before you do that, you have to set these boxes for all of your electrical, plumbing, mechanical, like all your utilities to make sure everything kind of moves up. So part of what I had to do was go through and make sure everybody was ready to go before we poured. But there were times where we didn't have, the guys would take too long with the electrical stuff or whatever. Something happened where we had the concrete trucks come in and we weren't quite ready. There was some kind of clash that we had. So we'd have to run around, make sure everybody's set up. At one point, Jeff needed me to go make sure that the waterproofing was up on the wall the way it should have been. And I'm doing this as the concrete truck's actively pouring concrete in one corner. So I'm trying to not trip over rebar, but I'm booking it to the other end to make sure everything's good, take photos and make it back before the concrete truck actually swivels over and pours the section that I was just in. So needless to say, I got a little bit of that concrete splash as I was leaving the job site, just trying to get in and get out.
Well, I hope that the waterproofing was done correctly, because if it wasn't, and then you've got that concrete getting poured at the same time, would you guys have had to backtrack and chip away at some of that concrete and then re-poured?
We wouldn't have poured in that location. We would have had to figure out something new, but luckily everything was good to go in that particular instance. But it's that you're constantly on your toes, and sometimes your trades will get held up and certain things don't get done. And then the concrete who's scheduled to come, and when they do actually show up on time, you're like, crap, okay, now we've got to cram a bunch of things in. How long can we kind of maybe delay and drag out some testing before the concrete truck pours?
So one of the common challenges that a superintendent might face is kind of keeping track of all the different departments and keeping track of any holdups and making sure that things happen kind of in alignment, right? Kind of like what you described, making sure everything happens in a particular process. But if something gets held up, that you it's kind of like I don't know, playing with Play-Doh. You gotta make things mesh and mold as far as timelines go.
Yeah. So you're trained to follow a certain sequence that is a typical process. Like, for example, if you're talking about an office space, you demo everything, you put up your studs, and then you run, say, your electrical and then your plumbing. And then you've got these inspections. But sometimes a trade might get held up because they're busy on another job and they couldn't come in that day, or they're working on something that they don't, and they're out of certain material. And you're like, well, crap, I've got somebody scheduled to come in and do the inspection tomorrow, so we don't have a choice but to make it work. So we have to get creative and have them come in earlier if we need to, or stay later just to make the schedule work.
As a superintendent, are you ever dealing with the client?
Yes, especially when you're on the interior side of it. Even I guess Jeff would deal with the clients as well during our weekly meetings. But when I was in interiors, I found that when you're literally working in the space, your clients tend to come to you a lot more. So I would see them multiple times a week. and have to give them updates, walk them through the space, and answer any of their questions that they have on the progress.
I think we'll talk more about that process and what that's like and what those skills are later on in our little podcast here, our live stream. That's where you go for bonus content, the Patreon stuff. It sounds like travel is involved, but what does that exactly look like? Are you traveling? Obviously, when it's one project that you're dealing with, you're going to the same location every day until that project is complete. But when you go to the next project and then the next project, are you doing things in the same city or the same county, or is it all over the US or all over the world? What does that look like?
So that'll vary from company to company. There are companies out there that offer you the opportunity to travel. Sometimes you'll have a national company that has a department that focuses on, say, movie theaters, right? So they create a specialized team that really understands a particular client. So that, say, like AMC or whatever. AMC is like, okay, we're building a new place in Virginia, and then after that, we're going to Texas. And some companies will give their employees the opportunity to bounce from one location to another. And sometimes that comes with some pay stipends and things of that nature, which is pretty cool. But for the average person, say in the Northern Virginia, DC, Maryland area, those are literally the areas that we go, right? We could go on a job that's 10 minutes from where we live or 2 hours from where we live. And it's kind of dependent on your company and the discussions that you have with your boss. When I was a superintendent, I would literally have anything from a 10-minute job or alternatively an hour away. And my boss was really good about going back and forth to give me those opportunities so I'm not stranded on the roads, because traffic out here is horrendous a lot of times.
So what would you say to people who are considering being a construction superintendent, but they might have a family? What are some of those wow, words are really escaping me on this stream. If I have a family, I don't want to be on the road all the time. So is that just communication that you need to have with your employer? Kind of like something you got to kind of work out during the interview process?
Yeah, once you develop a good rapport with your boss, you can have those discussions. I worked with somebody who has a young daughter, and she was so important to him. So he had negotiated with his boss that he only works certain hours so that he can be there for his daughter. Or there's certain days of the year where he knows in advance that he's going to come in late because he's got to be there for his daughter. The industry hasn't always been that flexible, and there's still a lot of situations where there's not that flexibility, and the guys are spending hours on the road and hours on the job and not able to spend as much time home with their families. So it's one of those transitions that we're working towards resolving and bringing more of that human aspect into our industry and saying, hey, there's actually benefit when your superintendents can be home with their family and their crews aren't working 14-hour days, because at some point you're not productive anymore, and that doesn't move the bottom line for the company, and it burns out your people.
Yeah, burns out your people and burns out your budget. So speaking of burnout, how much time do you get to spend on yourself as a superintendent, and what do you enjoy doing on your off time?
So luckily, with the 5 to 1 or 6 to 2 schedule, I was very lucky that I could actually make an 8-hour, 9-hour day a consistent part of my life. And not every superintendent gets that luxury. But that's kind of one of those perks about working interior. So when I got to go and leave earlier in the day, that meant I had my whole afternoon. I could run errands. I could go do all the things that take forever to do because there's long lines, like go to the grocery store, be in and out, and then move on with my life and come home. What it also allowed me to do is spend time cultivating the podcast and the community, and being a really active member in the National Association of Women in Construction. So I've held on to chapter roles, regional roles, and got to the point where I had some time and I was like, you know what, let's start our own chapter here in Northern Virginia. So that's a lot of what I do with my free time.
I love that. That's awesome. If you guys are enjoying this live stream, head over to patreon.com/industry explorers to check out some more bonus content, including a bonus interview after this one with Kathryn. Let's talk education. This is what all the students want to know. Is a college degree necessary to become a construction superintendent?
No, not at all. I have worked with people who just came up through the trades just by the exposure. And they worked their way up from, say, a carpenter to a foreman. And a foreman is somebody who oversees specific crews. And you usually hear the word foreman when it comes to a subcontractor or trade. I have met people who have gone down the education route, and I have too. Like I personally did too. But you don't necessarily need a construction degree to be successful in this industry. But I have found that having it and having Virginia Tech on my resume have been key items that pull people into me. They want to talk to me because they know I came from a really strong program. And that's made it easier for me to grow my career, to negotiate my salary.
Well, there you go. So what major do you recommend someone do?
So there's so many opportunities. Different schools label their programs differently. With Virginia Tech, you had, they have what's called the Myers-Lawson School of Construction.
What is it? Sorry, can you say that?
Myers-Lawson School of Construction.
Okay.
It is a mouthful.
Yeah.
So that houses the building construction major. There is also the CEM program, which is the Construction Engineering Management, which is more of that engineering focus. Whereas building construction was more of the overall view, the more the management side that I think caters really well to the general construction part of the industry. I have met people who've gone to Penn State, and a lot of those degrees are actually architectural engineering degrees. I also have friends who went the civil route. So there's a lot of options out there. It just depends on what direction you want to go in and what focus you want to have.
How might some of the different options affect the way someone is as a superintendent? So how might being someone who goes into architectural engineering versus construction management versus a different kind of major that would help, get you into this role, how might these three different examples of a person be different as superintendents? Does that question make sense?
It does. I'm just going to kind of think about that for a second. I think those people the people who have more of an engineering degree can look at things on a more technical aspect because they've got a little bit more of that exposure in school where that seems to be kind of where they focus a little bit more. Whereas the program I came from, it was more general. It's about managing, coordinating, creating estimates, planning out a job site. So it was more of like a managerial perspective, in my opinion.
I can see how so what I'm gathering from this is that there are different majors that you can choose, and any of them will result in becoming a construction superintendent if that's what you want. But the program that you enter into, it might have you develop different skill sets. Someone with the architectural emphasis might have different strengths versus someone who's got the engineering background versus someone who goes to vocational school as a electrician or a carpenter or whatever. So what are the essential interpersonal or technical skills that one should have as a superintendent? We already heard quite a few of them.
Scheduling is a big
Scheduling.
one.
Like
Understanding
time management or?
Yes, also time management. So there's a certain order that you build things, right? And having an understanding of how each of those pieces come together can help create more productivity and will help you know who to reach out to and when, so you can make sure those crews are on site at the right time. Um, and in that same breath, you want to also understand how long it takes a certain type of task to be completed. Because I've been on jobs where a project manager who doesn't have that field experience because they spend all their time in the office, they'll take a stab at a schedule and it won't be realistic. And oftentimes they're very condensed because they're there to kind of make the client happy, right? This is the client's deadline. So this is what we have to provide. But then when you dig into the drawings, you're like, well, that's not necessarily going to be the case. We might need to readjust some of these tasks so that it flows a lot smoother. And if we're doing like a renovation, we have to go in and first just kind of explore, right? Because what's on paper isn't always what you see in real life. So that is such like a key component. And I made sure that I spent some time really learning those processes. And it just really benefits the entire project team. Another good skill to have is conflict resolution. Because needless to say, there's a lot of that when you have a lot of different personalities in a very small area. People tend to clash and you just kind of have to work your way through it. Or you have to deal with people yelling at you because they're not happy about something. So knowing how to be presentable, hold yourself professionally before you're engaging with somebody who is a little worked up.
That's a really fantastic skill set that I don't think not everybody mentions on this. A lot of it is communication, but specifically conflict resolution is such a great example of a skill that one should really develop as they, get into this or something else where you're managing several teams and navigating a lot of different personalities. If you guys like this content, head over to patreon.com/industry explorers. We've got bonus material there. And if you become a Patreon or my patron, you get access to all the bonus content. If you guys have any questions, feel free to write them in the comments and we'll ask Kathryn. But until we get another question that comes in, I have a bonus question for you, which is, what is a tool that you often use as a superintendent? It can be a physical tool. It can be a software program. What's a tool that you often use?
Oh, I had two, well, actually, I guess three go-to things that I think can help most people run most jobs. And for me, those were things like Procore, so like a project management software, Bluebeam, which in a very basic sense is like a PDF, like an Adobe, but it's more geared towards the construction industry so that you could use it to upload drawings, scale, take measurements, make notes on. And I thought that was incredibly handy to have. And then emails, just like Google Mail. Was super helpful because it's a great way to like organize your emails and shoot out quick messages to people.
Fantastic. If we don't have any more questions from the audience coming in, this is your very last chance. Kathryn, would you like to end this on an industry insight that you would like our audience members to finish this live stream on?
I would like people to take into consideration, regardless of whatever industry that they're in, that at the end of the day, this is your career and you are your own boss, despite what your manager says. If you're not happy with where you are, then you have every right, every opportunity to make those changes and to go find a better fit for yourself.
That is the best advice ever. Make sure you guys go check out Space2Build. Where can we find Space to Build? Is it just anywhere where you can find podcasts, or is it also on YouTube?
So it's not on YouTube. I wasn't ready to tackle that whole beast yet, but I'm on any major platforms. The two biggest ones are Spotify and Apple Podcast.
Fantastic. Well, you guys enjoy Space to Build if you want to learn more about the construction industry. And what else do you talk about on that show?
So it is focused on the hardworking women in construction. We talk about their experiences coming up through the industry and what their day-to-day roles look like. So it's very similar to what you do here, but it's very specific to the construction industry. So I've talked to home builders, concrete subcontractors, demolition experts, superintendents, project engineers who are experiencing their first year of work, which is a great episode.
Really
My friend
cool. That's a
Kayla
really
came
cool
on for that.
perspective.
So I want to try to aim for a little bit of everything because there's so much opportunity and so much of a labor shortage in our industry that there's room for everybody to be a part of it.
Well, I absolutely love that. And I'm going to binge your episodes. I should have done that before this, but now I'm going to definitely do it after this live stream. Well, thank you so much. Congratulations. This is your very first live stream.
Thank
And
you.
thank you for joining me. Guys, head over to patreon.com for some bonus content. Kathryn and I will see you there. And explorers, I'll see you on our next adventure. Take care, everyone.